Okay, well now we're going to look at laboratory exercise 4, which is going to do very similar things to that we did in PHP, but we're going to do it in ASP.NET using Visual Studio. So I've called up the sheet for laboratory 4, and you look through the basic information here, and it's telling you several places where you can get some online further instruction and help. And then it says we need to have done lab 2, and we have done lab 2, and we've got our SQL tables already sorted, and we, as it says, need to have imported the crime database. So, and again, as it says, we use this test 23 where we substitute our own web page. So we'll be creating the web space, and the first thing we have to do, as it says here, is start up Visual Studio, and we get new website. So let's do that. First, let's close down this previous solution. And now we can do new website. So .NET Framework 4.5, and then we choose an ASP.NET empty website. And then we click OK, and then we want a website location, so we don't want it there, we actually want it, as it says here, in the web dev. Now we could make that on one of our own drives. So I've already got a website here. Which was the other file, so I can tell it that we'll just carry on with that existing website. Okay. So to begin with, it says in the Solution Explorer, right click on the website and select Add New Item. Add New Item. And then we can choose a web form. We got Visual C#, and then it says we can leave the file name as a default. Let's add that. it shows it looks like this. Okay. Now this piece of text explains that, and it also explains that there's some code behind that in this file, default aspx.c#. And the other thing it points out is the difference in this and a standard web form. Right, in this example it says we could add some more things to the C#. So we could, for example, add this translator and put that in the page load. And then we can put this piece of code at the bottom here. Unfortunately we have to format that, but we can get Visual Studio to do that. So we'll just tell it to format that for us. Okay. So that's basic code there. And it's talking about this label 2 and label 1 piece of code here. And then it says these labels needed to be added to the ASPX page, otherwise we have an error. So we go back to that and we'll put those labels in the ASPX page here. So that replaces this whole form like this. So we paste that in there, and we've lost the formatting again, but we'll just quickly put that back in again. So here we are, we've got to put that back in there. And then it's saying we don't actually need to do anything to particularly test this. We can press F5 and so it says, would you like to enable with debugging or run without debugging? So let's run without debugging. So there we are. It's just launched a browser in the server that is magically created to run it, and it's done the translation. So we can close that. And we can see that that form is passing this text "Hello World" in this form to this C# code, which is doing some translation of the text and displaying it. Now there's an exercise here for you to do to learn a bit more about this kind of thing, and it's talking about doing a Klingon translator. You can do a list box, and I'll leave that exercise for you to do, and I'll move through onto the database access part. So now in Visual Studio we're going to use this Chrome table, so we select View Server Explorer from the menu. View Server Explorer. There we are. And we right click on the data connections and add a connection. And so a Microsoft SQL server. Okay. And then we continue. And now we can put the server name, which is the standard name that we've been using. Select the database name, and here you have to add your own username. Then we can do test connection, that's okay, and then we can click OK. So you can expand it to view the tables, just like you did with Visual Studio. We see we've got car table and crime table. So then, as it says, we can use this database in the web pages. So you need to add a data source to the page, which can then be queried. So first create a new blank page. So let's do that. We go here and we can add a new item. So I could call it something like a web form, like we did before, and I could give it a name. So default 2 is as good as any. And here it is here. So create a new, then switch the view from source to design. Right, it is design. And open the toolbox and select data controls. So let's find the toolbox. Tools. Here's the toolbox. Right. So switch, select data. Collection of tools, that's this one. So let's close the standard data tools, drag a SQL data source onto my web page. So there we are. We've got an SQL data source. Click on the little arrow to the right of the SQL data source here. And then we can configure the data source, and in the dialog click next, select the data connection that we've just made, so here, that's that one, and then click next and next. And then we can configure the select statement, choose crime, okay, and make sure star is selected in the columns list. Done that. This will ensure the data connection returns all the columns. Click next. So it says we can test the query if we like, and we get loads of things, and we click finish. And here we are, we've got something a bit like that. So here it says so if you switch the source view of the ASPX page, you'll see that. So we switch it back to the source view, we can see that it's put all that material in the ASPX page, and we've got something a bit like that. So it says we now need to add something which will show the data. The easiest way to do this is to switch to design mode, again. And add a grid view control. So we'll need the toolbox back, and we can put a grid view control in. Okay, like that. And you need to configure it by clicking on the little right facing arrow and use a drop down box to choose the data source we chose earlier. Okay. There's immediately a set of column headings appear which we've seen, and some dummy data, and we can edit the grid data to remove some columns if we want, because they won't all fit on the screen. Remove all but year. Force, homicide and attempted murder. So we can delete that one. We can delete that one. Delete that one. Remove that column. We can remove that column. We can remove that column. That column, we can remove that column, we can remove that column, we can remove that column, so we want to leave that one, well, I want to move that one. Let's see if we got rid of. Right, so we've got rid of all those columns. Now switch back to the source view, and you'll see that a new control has been added to the page. So this is explained here about how the grid view and other things work. So then it says we can run this again. I shall quickly save this page with Control S, and then it says we can press F5, we can run this page, and here we can see it's displayed the table of all the data that we've extracted from the crime database of those few columns. It said it wasn't paginated. It says all we have to do is allow paging equals true to the grid view. So ASP grid view, let's just put that in. Allow paging equals true. Let's copy that. Here we are in the grid view. I'll put that in there. Okay, I can save that. And I can run it again. Right, see, it's paginated it. I can have to look at page 10. So says we can add ASP list box to your form in the design, so I can go back in there and I can go back to the toolbox. Now, as it says, we can add a list box which comes from the standard tools in the toolbox here. We can add that list box, there we are, and we can choose the data source from our standard data source, and as it says we can select a force. Okay. So we can save that, and then it says, see what happens. So we can try and run that again. And you can see we've now got a list box with the forces in here that are in the database. And as now it says as an exercise, it could say find out how to use that property to allow you to choose a force, perhaps to influence or select what's coming in that form. It also says perhaps you could select a text box and you could type in something like a year, and then you could use a validator to validate that's a year in the right range for the database. So we can close down that display. So there's a few things further you can do with these tools from the toolbox and put them in the page there. Then after that exercise it suggests some other things, like you could add a new column to your crimes table, and you can do various other configurations on your data. And once you've completed those exercises, it gives you all the tools and information you need to implement the coursework, and in particular make a server-side script called location.aspx, which does something similar to what you might have done in PHP, and then you can test those inquiries for get and post using the HTML client that we may write at the beginning. So that's an introduction to all of the things that you need to build a coursework: HTML, web pages, web forms, SQL databases, SQL servers, PHP pages, PHP forms, ASPX pages, server-side scripting, and forms, and put it all together. That's what you need for the web technology, which is assessed by the little exercise. Hope you found that useful.